Ric Bucher joining us now, brought to you by Mercedes-Benz, the best or nothing. You know, I said to start the show, the Clippers are a strange franchise. It was a strange series. Kawhi is sort of a strange cat. Do I like the Clippers, or do I just like Kawhi when he turns into LeBron about 3 games a series? I mean, now they go and face Utah, that does not have a wing to stop Kawhi. He could have a monster series,
right.
But Utah's rested. Utah plays defense. Dallas doesn't. What do you think, Dallas? I think they're going to. I think the Clippers are going to fall into another hole and have to fight their way out of it. That's kind of my projection going forward.
There's always that possibility. I'm with you, Colin. I know what the Clippers are on paper, but we don't always see that on the court. I do believe that Rick Carlisle and the Dallas Mavericks did the Clippers a great service by working their way to playing Boban Marjanovic. Now, it's not as if Boban is Rudy Gobert by any stretch. They're not in the same category. But playing that big in the middle where you go small and have to attack the rim and then either get past him or kick it for threes, that became the formula for the Clippers by the end of the series. And hats off to Ty Lue, because he's the one who really utilized that entire roster. Going to a Luke Kennard, Luke Kennard and Terrence Mann played a total of 14 seconds in game 1. Patrick Beverley and Ivica Zubac were starters. They were out of the rotation.
Yep.
Terrence Mann and Luke Kennard were the biggest subs coming off the bench in Game 7. And this is a Luke Kennard that he had no familiarity with because Kennard wasn't on the team last year. So I just believe that Ty Lue did a tremendous amount of changes in comparison to what Doc Rivers didn't do last year. I went and looked at the Denver series. Same starting lineup, same rotation in Game 1 against Denver as in Game 7 when they lost. And meanwhile, Ty was making all sorts of changes. But the bottom line is they had to deal with Dallas realizing that they couldn't play small. Dallas played small, played better at the beginning of the series. And Ty Lue made adjustments.
Yeah.
And then Carlisle countered and went big with Boban. And the Clippers figured that out. So having had to play that way against Boban, I believe they go into this series feeling much more confident about their small ball capabilities and utilizing the entire roster than they would have otherwise. But in terms of, are they going to sustain this now? Who the hell knows? The Clippers, as soon as they get to a point where they're like, hey, did we prove who we are? Oh, we did? Okay, can we downshift? And then they get into trouble and have to get going again. So hopefully they've learned their lesson, but we won't find out until we see it.
You know, it's funny. I've said this for years. If I was an NBA free agent, Dallas would always be at the top of my list. Number 1, no state tax. Number 2, it's in the middle of the country. So I don't have a 6-hour flight either way, middle of the country. It's a great city for young people, beautiful people. You know, there's a lot of things to do. Yet they don't land free agents. They couldn't get Dirk a 2. And I look at Luka and I think, it's harder to find a 2 than ever because these kids coming out of high school and college, you have a year of tape. It's all projection. You don't really know what you're getting. You know, and then sometimes you hit the lottery and you get like Trae Young. And I look at Luka, and to me, my takeaway this morning is the pressure now is not on Luka. The pressure's on Mark Cuban. You couldn't find a 2 or Dirk, and you settled for a title. I don't know why they can't get free agents in Dallas. Great place to live, but I mean, let's be honest. Porzingis is not the answer, right?
No, Porzingis is not the answer as a number 2. The only thing I don't like about Dallas is the airport. I hate that airport. It's a city unto itself. That said, here's the tricky part with Luka Doncic now, and this is the one way in which I put him in the LeBron James category, is that you need very particular players around him.
Yeah.
And you need a number 2 that can be very effective without necessarily having the ball in his hands. That's what makes, like, you want him to be able to go one-on-one. You want that guy to be able to get you shots in need situations, but he may not be dominating the ball or seeing the ball for 3 quarters, and then he's got to light it up in the 4th. That's what makes guys very hard to find that can fit that 2 spot next to a guy who's going to dominate the ball the way Doncic is. The other part of it is that Doncic is really kind of while he's a point guard, he plays a slower big man style against a lot of guys.
Yeah.
You play a slower pace. He's going to work his way to his spots. I think more than anything, finding a way to play fast and still allow him to play that slow style is another tricky element to how do you build this team. So there aren't any, you have a great talent, and that's sometimes a curse because now you have to make good around that great talent that dominates the ball. How do you ultimately do that? And there are no easy answers. I immediately think of a guy like a Bradley Beal that would be the ideal number 2 because he demonstrated with Russell Westbrook this year that doesn't necessarily have the ball in his hands all the time and can still deliver big performances. That would be the number 1 guy on my list in terms of trying to get him and put him next to Luka.
So I was watching Milwaukee and Brooklyn, and I've been a cynic of Brooklyn first month of the season. Then I came around and said, it's just great players play together. We've seen it at the Olympics. We see it in AAU. We see it at Kentucky. You can throw great players together and they can play. And I'm thinking to myself after game 1, I'm like, Jesus, how discouraging for Milwaukee. Milwaukee's got better health, better chemistry, a veteran coach. And I sat there and I thought to myself, the messaging for a Dame or a Luka or a Zion is just go play with A's. You'll figure out the chemistry. You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Seriously, Harden doesn't play game 2. If Milwaukee loses game 2, boy, doesn't that get into that head of that Milwaukee franchise a little bit?
Well, it gets in the head of every basketball aficionado because it means that AAU basketball has taken over the NBA.
That's
we
right.
don't need to play games. We just show up for the weekend and let's play the tournament.
That's
we
right.
got the best players, so we can play. And here's the thing that we've seen through, and this is the question that I had, because the three-point shot, the ability to take a ton of them and make a ton of them, had a huge influence on the regular season. We saw that with Steph Curry dragging the Warriors into contention for a playoff spot. We saw it with the Lakers not being able to shoot the 3. And that's what we've seen so far in these playoffs, and particularly coming up in this next round. The Brooklyn Nets just have more guys who can consistently dribble, penetrate, and kick it for 3s. And if you look at all the games over the weekend, the team that shot the 3 the best and the most are the teams that won going away. It was the same with the Clippers-Mavs series.
Yeah.
Mavs outshot them early, and as a result, won. Clippers found their way, played small, started shooting the 3 the way they did all the regular season. Boom, they win the series.
Yeah.
And that's what I saw more than anything else between Brooklyn and the Bucks and Atlanta and Philadelphia. And that's where you look at Philadelphia and you look at Milwaukee. Like you, I like both of those teams as playoff teams, largely because of how they play defense. But if you can get up enough 3s and you can get to the free throw line, you can turn that what is normal in the postseason on its head, and it now becomes shooting the 3 is more important than playing defense. And that was never the case in the postseason, but it just may be the case in this postseason. And it's why I'm not changing my opinion of the Nets just yet, but we may have changed the dynamic of how playoff games are won. And if we have, then the Nets have an advantage that I thought was not going to be big enough considering their disadvantage playing defense.
Good stuff, Ric Bucher, Fox Sports. Good talking to you, bud.
You got it, Colin.